Welcome back to the conversation, and we're still waiting to connect with our guest in Oslo, Dr. Marcelin El-Tahir. But before we get her on the panel, it will be nice to look at what this situation means for other countries. Because if you look at the evacuations that have been happening, you saw that British Special Forces, the American came in with Chinook helicopters. But when you look at, Sudan is the African continent, apart from Egyptians, other sub-Saharan African countries are having difficulties evacuating their own citizens from Sudan. But I guess we have Dr. El-Tahir on the line. Good evening, Dr. El-Tahir. Thanks for joining us in the conversation.
Good evening.
I'd like to start with the, let's get straight into the action. Can you provide a detailed account of the present situation? Is the fighting still ongoing, and is it restricted to Khartoum and Omdurman? And what's the situation outside of the capital?
The situation, the intense fighting is in the capital, and the capital, Khartoum, is divided into three: Khartoum North, Khartoum, and Omdurman. And the fighting is pretty much in all three towns of which constitute the capital, Khartoum, and also the peripheries of those three smaller towns. The situation in outside the capital is particularly fierce fighting in Darfur and in Al-Ubaid, which is the capital of Kordofan. That is an area that is halfway between Khartoum and Darfur. That's also an area of severe fighting. The fighting does continue, and the two fighting parties have very little respect for the ceasefire agreements that they set up, and the situation, like I said, is still very, 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 very serious for the millions of people in Khartoum. The humanitarian situation is basically a disaster because after so many days of people having shortages of water and electricity and wounded and lack of hospitals, a lot of hospitals have been bombarded. There is a disastrous humanitarian situation in the capital, Khartoum. Some people managed to leave the capital, but the majority are still entrapped in that fighting. That is when it comes to the humanitarian situation.
Okay.
When it comes to the military situation, well, reports are saying that the two parties are very, very exhausted. There is something which is very important to mention here, that this situation is not a situation of a civil war. There is no civil war in the Sudan now. What there is now are two military factions fighting each other. The less political power there is at the moment, this situation can develop into a civil war situation. However, it is still within the African Union, African nations, and the international community to contain the situation and ensure that it does not develop into a civil war. There are very little signs that this is going to develop into a civil war yet, because like I said, because of the many years of civil grassroots civil rights movement that is all over the country, which has there is no sides in this, there is no one taking sides, and this one based on religion or tribe or anything. But having said that, this is only for now. If the two parties they do not get enough pressure upon them, then it might develop into a civil war situation whereby other elements can get into the equation, like ethnicity, tribalism, and etc. At the moment, the opportunity is within the hands of the African Union and the African nations to try and do something to contain this situation, not the least because of lacking to do any action for the last 4 years in supporting the civilian and democratic grassroots movement that is in the Sudan.
All right, now, Dr. El Tahir, while we are waiting for the African Union and we're calling on all parties for cessation of hostilities, can you tell us more about the evacuation process? Because you talked about how dire the humanitarian situation is in Sudan. We're hearing that some foreign nationals have evacuated their people. So tell us more about this process of evacuation. And has there been any joint assistance or effort from international parties and also indigenous people? What's the process so far?
Well, unfortunately, no, fortunately, not unfortunately, sorry. Fortunately, some foreigners have been evacuated, not all of them. I believe mostly Western diplomats and Gulf Arab diplomats and Egyptians have been evacuated. I don't know very much about how much African diplomats have been evacuated, but at the moment, it is mostly primarily the diplomats and workers in international organizations and international NGOs who are being evacuated, mostly predominantly foreigners. When it comes to the people of the Sudan, some of them who have dual citizenship, but at the same time they hold positions in international organizations and so on, they have been evacuated, but mostly citizens of dual citizenships are still stranded in the country. And the people of the Sudan who actually managed to evacuate, this was based on personal individual efforts by fleeing mostly to Egypt in neighboring countries or taking the boats to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. So these are the two countries where people mostly fled to, mainly because Sudanese citizens do not need visas for these two countries. When it comes to fleeing to Ethiopia, there are two hindrances here. The first hindrance is the visa question, because Sudanese nationals do not hold, they require a visa to go to Ethiopia. But additionally, the road to Ethiopia, there is the civil war in Ethiopia, so there are already refugees from Ethiopia in eastern Sudan. So that road via the town of Gadarif and Al-Galabat, that road is quite dangerous, and in addition, the visa problem. So people who manage to escape, they manage to escape to Saudi Arabia through the Red Sea from Port Sudan. So they take the road up until Port Sudan, and then the boat from Port Sudan to Jeddah, which I believe is only 2.5 hours. And then alternatively, they go through the north of Sudan and to Upper Egypt, to the Aswan area. And from there, they either take, once you are in Aswan, you're already in Egyptian territory. And then they take planes or trains to the capital, Cairo, and Alexandria, where a strong Sudanese hold in these two cities, Alexandria and Cairo.
Now, Dr. El Tahir, it's a very emotional moment for many Sudanese, seeing this Western diplomats and people leave the country. Some feel abandoned and angry. I'm going to read a quote from a Sudanese journalist that is based in Khartoum. And she said, "To the Western negotiators, you put us in this mess, and now you're swooping in to take your kinfolk, the ones that matter, and leaving us behind to these two modern psychopaths." That's Burhan and Hemeti. End of quote. What do you make of this statement, and do you share the same type of sentiments? Do you think Sudan has been abandoned by its Western partners?
Sudan has always been abandoned by Western partners. It's not because they took away their diplomats. As a matter of fact, I don't want any harm to diplomats. No, we are a civil society. We are a society that we believe in law and order, and we believe that an immunity actually does mean an immunity. A diplomat should not be killed in the Sudan. This is not my grievance with Westerners for leaving now. That's normal and natural that they should leave now and they should use their immunity now. My grievance is for the last and I really don't want to go longer than last 4 years. My grievance is the last 4 years, where they really did everything they can to put as much pressure on killing the Sudanese revolution and the aspirations of the people of the Sudan. This is my grievance with them. It's not because they left now. No, that is normal, natural. Everybody can, is allowed to escape when it is a war situation. And I do not expect them to, and I do not want, as a matter of fact, to see dead diplomats in the streets of Khartoum. I don't want to see any dead bodies in the streets of Khartoum. But what they did is they did put us into this situation. They did suffocate and hijack the revolution. They did that specifically because if we succeeded, that will have consequences in the overall region. And that region is being ruled by dictators for very, very many years. And it suits the West that kingdoms and sheikhdoms and military dictators are ruling in the Middle East and North Africa. We were about to give a different example, and therefore we were suffocated repeatedly. In one video, I saw an analyst, a Western analyst, saying that the people of the Sudan have been fighting for five nations in the last 4 years, and that is really true. The civil movement of the Sudan have been fighting 5 nations, and it's all fine for the CNN and the Western media to repeatedly bring along the story of the Wagner Russian group, which is true. The Wagner group and the Wagner militias are doing huge atrocities in the Sudan, and they are looting the country's resources. But what they failed to mention are the Western institutions, and in particular, there is a law firm, an American law firm that has been operating in the Sudan since 2004, whereby they put all the legislations for the separation of South Sudan. They are putting all the legislations for and acting as a think tank, and they're acting on behalf of very many shady armed forces in the Sudan in order to legalize the fragmentation of the Sudan into more and more countries. There is an active role of the international Western community into the separation of Darfur and the separation of the Nuba Mountains, because the Sudan has been set up to be 5 different countries. Like I said, there is very little mention of that. However, even in classic Western media, like The Guardian, they started talking about that, because the case of the Sudan is particularly cynical and is particularly double standard. This is not the Taliban kind of regime. This is not the people. The people of the Sudan are not fighting. The people of Sudan are holding banners. The majority of Syrians.
Well, it's mostly a power struggle. Unfortunately, we're far run out of time. I would have wanted you to actually discuss on the aid plans, humanitarian plans, because for those still trapped in Sudan, we wonder how humanitarian aid will get to them. But we'll continue to have these discussions. Thank you so much, Dr. Marjolaine El-Haj El-Tahi, for joining us on this conversation. We do hope that there will be cessation of hostilities and fighting in Sudan and peace is brought back to Sudan. Thank you so much for sharing so much insights on this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.